general overview of the function, definition, and anatomy of the circulatory system, or the cardiovascular system. The circulatory system is comprised of the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. It consists of two circuits that carry blood around, the smaller being the pulmonary circuit, which runs between the heart and the lungs, and the larger being the systemic circuit, which runs between the heart and the peripheral tissues. The cardiac circulatory system functions by providing the tissues of the body with oxygen and nutrients which are transported in the blood. The pulmonary circuit carries the deoxygenated blood into the lungs, where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide that the body has produced occurs before the blood returns back to the heart. The heart then pumps the newly oxygenated blood around the systemic circuit of the body and delivers the oxygenated blood to the tissues before collecting the deoxygenated blood and sending it back to the heart with unused nutrients and metabolic waste products. These extra substances within the blood filter into the liver for processing. The heart is a muscle that acts as a pump. Through electrostimulation, it beats and pushes the blood around the entire body through the circulatory system. The heart is comprised of 4 chambers that consist of 2 pairs on the left and right sides of the heart. The atria collect blood returning to the heart, while the ventricles pump blood out of the heart. The valves in the heart prevent the backflow of blood into the chambers of the heart. The muscular septum divides up the 2 sections of the heart, creating a left and right side, each containing 1 atrium and 1 ventricle. The right side of the heart pumps deoxygenated blood, and the left side pumps oxygenated blood. The amount of blood in liters that is pumped out of the heart per minute is known as the cardiac output, which is around 5.6 liters in males and 4.9 liters in females. It can be calculated by multiplying the heart rate, which is the number of beats per minute, by the stroke volume, which is the amount of blood that collects in the ventricles when they are at full capacity and about to contract. The cardiac output varies depending on whether the person is exercising or resting. There are 3 major classes of blood vessels, namely arteries, veins, and capillaries, and they are categorized according to their histological structure. Arteries transport blood between the tissues and away from the heart and have thick muscular walls with small internal lumina or passageways that can withstand blood under high pressure. Veins carry blood away from the tissues and towards the heart and have thin walls. Their internal lumen is larger than that of the arteries due to the fact that they contain blood under low pressure. They also have valves that prevent the blood from flowing backwards. Lastly, the capillaries, which are found in the muscles and the lungs, are microscopic and have a 1-cell layer thick endothelial lining. In other words, the walls of the capillaries have the width of 1 single epithelial cell. They can only tolerate blood under very low pressure due to the fact that it will move slower and gas exchange has a chance to take place. This is also where the exchange of gases, water, nutrients, and waste products takes place, because the capillary walls are thin and fenestrated. After this, the capillaries collect into venules, which are the equivalent to arterioles and fenestrated. Capillaries connect arterioles and venules. The blood is made up of 4 major components. The plasma is the fluid that surrounds the blood cells and helps transport carbon dioxide, hormones, and metabolic waste products. Red blood cells, which are also known as erythrocytes, are formed in the bone marrow and function mainly as oxygen carriers. White blood cells, or leukocytes, make up the body's immune system by producing antibodies and helping destroy harmful microorganisms. These cells are also created in the bone marrow. Lastly, platelets are cells that clump together to form blood clots and help protect the body by preventing bleeding.
Welcome back to the EasyMed channel, where medical and science topics are made easy. The goal of the channel is to save you time in studying and help you throughout your career by giving you clear explanations for different topics. And every EasyMed video has an EasyMed blog linked down below in the description that correlates with the video and provides you with all the notes you need to know. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, that way you don't miss out on future videos and blogs that make topics easy. In this video today, we're going to go over the main anatomical structures of the heart. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to easily label this diagram. We've got some simple tricks that will help you remember all the different structures. So let's get started. We're first going to use this cartoon diagram of the heart to walk through all of the main anatomical structures. This will help simplify things. Then once we've gone over all the main structures using this picture, we'll go back to that first diagram and you'll see you'll be able to label the entire diagram without difficulty. Let's start with the chambers of the heart. You'll notice that there are 4 main chambers labeled 1 through 4 on the diagram. And the way we're going to simplify this is we're going to turn the heart into a square, and we're going to divide that square into 4 different boxes. These boxes will represent the chambers of the heart, and you can see that they're labeled to correlate with the diagram. Next, you'll notice that the heart can be divided into 2 sides. First, we have the right side shown in blue in the picture, and this includes chambers 1 and 2. And then we have the left side shown in red, which includes chambers 3 and 4. Next, we can divide these boxes or chambers even further. The same way we divided the 2 on the right from the 2 on the left, we can divide the 2 on the top from the 2 on the bottom. The 2 chambers on top are known as the atria, and this will include boxes 1 and 3, and the 2 chambers on the bottom are known as the ventricles, and this includes boxes 2 and 4. Now, the easy way to remember the atria are located on top and the ventricles are located on the bottom is to think of the alphabet. A comes before V, so the atria are located superiorly and the ventricles are located inferiorly. Now we have created this 2x2 table, which will help us label the different chambers of the heart. Box number 1 is located in the right upper portion, so this represents the right atrium. The second box is also on the right side, but now we're in the lower region, so this represents the right ventricle. For the third box, we go back up top, so we know it's going to be an atrium, but now we're on the left side, so this represents the left atrium. Lastly, box number 4 is located in the left lower region. This is the left ventricle. Now that we have a good understanding of the 4 chambers of the heart, let's move on to the 4 main valves. The function of these valves is to prevent the backward flow of blood into the previous chamber. You'll first notice a valve located between the right atrium and the right ventricle. This is known as the tricuspid valve. Now we're going to be talking about the blood flow through the heart a little bit later on in this video and also in a different video, but when that right ventricle squeezes and pumps blood forward, the tricuspid valve prevents the backflow of blood into the right atrium. We have a similar valve on the left side, located between the left atrium and the left ventricle. This is known as the mitral valve, sometimes also referred to as the bicuspid valve. In similar story, when the left ventricle squeezes and pumps blood forward, the mitral valve is going to prevent the backflow of blood into the left atrium. Now, because the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve are located between the atria and ventricles, they're also referred to as atrioventricular valves. Now, how can you remember the tricuspid valve is located on the right side and the mitral valve is located on the left side? Well, I have 3 different tricks for you, so pick your favorite one and use it. The first one is try it before you buy it. This will help you remember that the tricuspid valve comes before the bicuspid or the mitral valve. The second trick is to take the word tri and tricuspid, and those 3 letters also appear in the word right, so this will help you remember that the tricuspid valve is located on the right side of the heart. The third and final trick is to remember the different lobes of the lungs. So the right lung has 3 lobes, and the tricuspid valve, which tri represents 3, is located on the right side of the heart. And then the left lung has 2 lobes, and the bicuspid valve, which bi indicates 2, is located on the left side of the heart. So hopefully one of those 3 tricks will stick with you, and it will help you remember that the tricuspid valve is on the right and the mitral valve is on the left. Let's now move on to the final 2 valves. The next valve you'll notice is located on the other side of the right ventricle. It's where blood exits the right ventricle and enters the main pulmonary artery or pulmonary trunk. Now we're going to be talking about the pulmonary arteries shortly, so don't worry about those right now, but it will help you remember that the name of this valve is the pulmonary valve, also known as the pulmonic valve. And the function of the pulmonary valve is to prevent the backward flow of blood into the right ventricle. There's a similar valve on the left side, located between the left ventricle and the aorta. Again, we're going to talk about the aorta shortly, so don't worry about that right now. But it will help you remember that the name of this valve is the aortic valve, and the function of the aortic valve is to prevent the backflow of blood from the aorta to the left ventricle during diastole when that left ventricle is in a low pressure state, filling with blood from the left atrium. I do want to point out that there is a previous EasyMed video where we talk about the cardiac cycle. More specifically, we talk about how the pressures change in the atria and ventricles during systole and diastole and why those valves open and close. So that might be a good video to reference if you want more information on the valves. I'll link the video down below in the description, and you can also find it in the cardiology playlist as well. So now we have a good understanding of the 4 chambers and the 4 main valves of the heart. There are only 4 more structures we're going to talk about in this video, and those are the main blood vessels that allow blood to enter and exit the right side of the heart and enter and exit the left side of the heart. In order to get a better understanding of these structures, we're briefly going to look at the blood flow through the heart. First, all of the deoxygenated blood in the body will drain into the venous system and enter the right side of the heart, specifically the right atrium. The blood will then travel from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve and enter the right ventricle. The blood will then exit the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve and enter the lungs to be oxygenated. So the main goal of the right side of the heart is to deliver deoxygenated blood to the lungs so it can become oxygenated. An easy way to think about the function of the right side of the heart is it delivers blood right to the lungs. The oxygenated blood then travels from the lungs and enters the left side of the heart, specifically the left atrium. Blood will then travel from the left atrium through the mitral valve and enter the left ventricle. The blood will then exit the left ventricle through the aortic valve to be delivered to the rest of the body. So the main goal of the left side of the heart is to deliver oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. An easy way to remember the function of the left side of the heart is that it delivers blood that has left the lungs. So that was a really quick overview of the blood flow through the heart. The next EasyMed video is actually about the blood flow through the heart, where we go in much more detail, and there's also some simple tricks to remember all of this. The video should be released sometime this week, so by the time most of you are watching this, it should be out. Feel free to go over there and get more information. It'll be in the cardiology playlist. But for the purpose of this video, we now have enough information to talk about those final structures. The first 2 structures are responsible for carrying deoxygenated blood from the body to the right side of the heart, specifically the right atrium, and they're known as the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. They're easy to remember because we know any blood vessel carrying blood to the heart is a vein, and you can use the name vena cava to help you remember that. And then the superior vena cava is obviously going to be located superiorly. It carries deoxygenated blood from the upper body to the right side of the heart. The inferior vena cava is located inferiorly, and it carries deoxygenated blood from the lower body to the right side of the heart. Next, we have the blood vessel responsible for delivering the deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs, and this is known as the main pulmonary artery or pulmonary trunk. And the main pulmonary artery splits into the right pulmonary artery and left pulmonary artery. We're going to see more of this in the next diagram. The name pulmonary artery is easy to remember because it carries blood to the lungs, so that will help you remember pulmonary, and we know that any blood vessel carrying blood away from the heart is an artery. Typically, arteries carry oxygenated blood, but the pulmonary artery is unique in that it carries deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Next, we have the pulmonary veins, and they're responsible for carrying oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left side of the heart, specifically the left atrium. The name pulmonary vein is easy to remember because they carry blood from the lungs, so this will help you remember pulmonary. And again, we know blood vessels that carry blood to the heart are veins. Typically, veins carry deoxygenated blood, but the pulmonary veins are unique in that they carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left side of the heart. We'll see a better picture of the pulmonary veins in the next diagram. The final blood vessel is the aorta, and it's responsible for delivering oxygenated blood from the left side of the heart to the rest of the body. So now that we have gone over the main anatomical structures of the heart, let's go back to that first diagram, and you're going to find you'll be able to label the main parts. Let's start with the chambers of the heart, beginning with this one indicated by the star. Try to guess which structure this is, and hit pause in the video if you need more time. It's located on the right side of the heart, and it's in the upper region. We know that the atria are on top and the ventricles are on the bottom, so this is the right atrium. We're now going to move to the lower section of the heart, so try to guess which structure this is. We're still on the right side, and again the lower chambers are the ventricles, so this is the right ventricle. Moving to the left side of the heart, we're again in the upper region, so this is the left atrium. And as we move down to the lower chamber, we're still on the left side, so this will be the left ventricle. Let's now move on to the main blood vessels, beginning with the ones indicated by the stars. Again, try to guess the structure and hit pause in the video if you need more time. These blood vessels are carrying blood to the right atrium, so we know they're going to be veins. And in this case, they're the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. And their function is to deliver deoxygenated blood from the body to the right side of the heart. Moving on to the next structure, try to guess which one it is. We have a blood vessel that's exiting the right ventricle and going to the lungs. We know it's going to be an artery because it's a blood vessel that's carrying blood away from the heart, and it's carrying blood to the lungs. So it's going to be the pulmonary artery. Specifically where the star is, that's the pulmonary trunk or the main pulmonary artery, and then it splits into the right and left pulmonary arteries. And the function of them is to deliver deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs to become oxygenated. Moving on to the next structures, we have blood vessels that are delivering blood from the lungs to the left atrium. So we know they're going to be veins because they're carrying blood toward the heart, and because they're coming from the lungs, they're going to be the pulmonary veins. And the function of them is to deliver oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left side of the heart, specifically the left atrium. The final main blood vessel is one that is exiting the left ventricle and delivering blood to the rest of the body. Again, we know it's an artery because it's carrying blood away from the heart, and in this case it's the aorta. The function of the aorta is to deliver oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. Lastly, we're going to go over the four main valves, starting with the one indicated by the star. Again, try to guess the structure. This valve is located between the right atrium and the right ventricle, so it's going to be the tricuspid valve. And the function of the tricuspid valve is to prevent the backflow of blood from the right ventricle to the right atrium during systole when that right ventricle is pumping blood forward into the pulmonary arteries. Moving on to the next valve, this is located on the left side between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So it's going to be the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. And the function of the mitral valve is to prevent the backflow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium during systole when the left ventricle is pumping blood forward into the aorta. And you can remember the tricuspid valve is on the right and the mitral valve is on the left, using the saying, try it before you buy it. Or you can use the lungs. The right lung has 3 lobes and the tricuspid valve is located on the right. The left lung has 2 lobes and the mitral valve is on the left. The next valve is located between the right ventricle and the main pulmonary artery or pulmonary trunk. So this is going to be the pulmonary valve. And its function is to prevent the backflow of blood from the pulmonary arteries to the right ventricle during diastole, when that right ventricle is in a low pressure state, filling with blood from the right atrium. The final valve is on the left side, located between the left ventricle and the aorta. So this is going to be the aortic valve. And the function of the aortic valve is to prevent the backflow of blood from the aorta to the left ventricle during diastole when the left ventricle is in a low pressure state, filling with blood from the left atrium. So now you're able to label the main anatomical structures of the heart, and hopefully this video made it easy for you.
It's Professor Dave. Let's look at the heart.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
Now that we've learned about the composition and function of blood, it's time to learn about the system that circulates blood around the body, which is rather appropriately called the circulatory system, also known as the cardiovascular system. This is comprised of the heart and an incredible number of arteries and veins and capillaries that carry blood to every extremity of your body. There is a lot to discuss here, so let's start by taking a close look at the heart. First thing we must point out is that the heart participates in 2 circuits. Blood enters the right side of the heart and is sent to the lungs, where it becomes oxygenated, when the oxygen we breathe in from the air around us diffuses through the lungs and enters the bloodstream to bind to hemoglobin. Then this returns to the left side of the heart to complete the pulmonary circuit. Then the oxygenated blood leaves the left side of the heart and is sent throughout the body to deliver oxygen and nutrients to all the various tissues that need oxygen to perform cellular respiration. It unloads all that oxygen and eventually makes it back to the right side of the heart, thus completing the systemic circuit. So we have 2 circuits and 2 receiving chambers in the heart, where these cycles finish, those being the right atrium and left atrium. Along with these, there are 2 main pumping chambers, those being the right ventricle and left ventricle. Speaking of chambers, the heart has 4 of them. These are the 2 atria and the 2 ventricles we talked about. The atria are separated by the interatrial septum, and the ventricles are separated by the interventricular septum. The atria are the receiving chambers where blood arrives, which is then pushed down into the ventricles. Oxygen-poor blood enters the right atrium through 3 different veins. The superior vena cava delivers blood from upper parts of the body. The inferior vena cava delivers blood from lower parts of the body, and the coronary sinus collects blood draining from the myocardium. For the left atrium, there are 4 entryways, and these are the pulmonary veins, which deliver blood from the lungs back to the heart. The ventricles make up much more of the volume of the heart, and these are the actual pumps. When the ventricles contract, that's what propels the blood out of the heart and into circulation. The right ventricle sends blood into the pulmonary trunk, which goes to the lungs, and the left ventricle sends blood into the aorta, which is an artery, the largest one in the body. We will talk about arteries and other blood vessels later. For now, let's stick to the anatomy of the heart. Another important feature is the heart valves. These ensure the unidirectional flow of blood, meaning they keep the blood going in the correct direction. There are 2 atrioventricular valves, or AV valves, which connect each atrium to its corresponding ventricle. The right one is tricuspid, meaning it has 3 little flaps, whereas the left one is mitral, or bicuspid, meaning 2 flaps. When the heart is relaxed, blood flows through, but when a ventricle contracts, the valve will close due to the change in pressure. There are 2 other valves called semilunar valves, and these are the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve. These connect the ventricles and the arteries that stem from them, preventing blood that is leaving from flowing back into the ventricle. Now let's go a little deeper. When we learned about the types of muscle earlier in the series, we saw that the heart has its very own type, cardiac muscle, which is not found anywhere else in the body. Cardiac muscle fibers are similar to skeletal muscle fibers in that they are striated. So that's a basic introduction to the heart. There is plenty more to discuss regarding heart rate and other phenomena, but that will have to wait for another time. For now, let's continue by looking at other aspects of the circulatory system.